On the night of December 24th, at exactly 7:32 in the evening, Los Angeles felt strangely quiet for a city that usually refused to sleep. The streets around Echo Park were lined with glowing Christmas lights, but the air carried something else that Daniel couldn't name. Maybe it was the weight of the year. Maybe it was the loneliness he had tried so hard to outrun. Or maybe, deep inside, he knew that something was waiting for him that night. Something he hadn't been ready to face until now. Daniel Reed, 31, stood in the parking lot behind his apartment building, staring at the soft halo of downtown lights rising above the horizon. The December air was cooler than usual for Los Angeles, brushing against his cheeks with a surprising sharpness. He zipped up his jacket as he waited for his rideshare request to be accepted. For the last 4 years he had spent Christmas Eve the same way, working late at the small sound mixing studio on Sunset Boulevard, avoiding holiday dinners and questions he didn't want to answer. But tonight he wasn't going to work. Tonight he was going back to a place he had avoided since the winter of 2021. Back to see his father. A notification buzzed on his phone. "Your driver, Araceli, will arrive in 3 minutes." Daniel sighed and tucked the phone into his pocket. He could feel his heart beating a little faster than usual, a rhythm that reminded him of the late December nights when he was a kid, waiting for the sound of his father's car pulling into the driveway in Pasadena. Back then, Christmas Eve meant warmth and loud music and his mother laughing loudly as she burned the gingerbread cookies again. Those memories had once felt like gifts. Now they felt like distant cities he no longer knew how to get back to. As he stepped onto the quiet street, he noticed how the houses around him glowed softly with string lights. Inflatable Santas swayed gently in the breeze. A faint scent of pine drifted from a neighbor's doorway. Despite the decorations, something about the night felt heavier, like the city itself was holding its breath. When the small blue Prius pulled up in front of him, he climbed in and offered the driver a polite smile. "Where to?" Araceli asked, her voice calm and warm. "Pasadena," he replied. "Near Orange Grove and Oak Knoll." "Christmas Eve visit?" she asked gently. "Yeah," Daniel said. "Something like that." The car merged into traffic. Holiday songs played quietly through the radio, something soft and old, maybe from the 60s. Daniel watched the city move past his window. The palm trees along Sunset Boulevard were wrapped in thin glowing strips of lights. Families walked down the sidewalks carrying gifts. Restaurants were closing early, their neon signs flickering slightly in the chill. As they headed north, the city grew quieter. Daniel's thoughts grew louder. It had been 3 years since he last saw his father. 3 years since the argument that ended with a slammed door and a sentence Daniel regretted the moment he said it. 3 years since he left the house without looking back. "I don't need you to tell me how to live my life." He could still hear the echo of that moment. He had replayed it so many times that it sounded like a recording from the studio, something he could manipulate, edit, or soften. But the truth was that some words refused to be erased, no matter how much time passed. The car slowed as they entered Pasadena. Houses here were decorated with more elegance than in the city. Tall trees draped with warm white lights. Wide front yards with lanterns guiding paths to porches. A faint fog hung low, making the street lamps glow like floating halos. Daniel's chest tightened as they turned onto Oak Knoll Avenue. The house appeared slowly, familiar and unchanged. The tall oak tree still stood at the corner of the yard. The windows glowed with soft golden light. A wreath hung on the door, just like every year. He swallowed hard. "Do you want me to wait?" Araceli asked gently. Daniel shook his head. "No. Thank you. I'll be okay." He stepped out of the car and closed the door behind him. The moment he set foot on the sidewalk, the crisp December air hit him again. He looked at the house, the warm light spilling through the curtains, the faint sound of what might have been jazz playing inside. For a long moment, he just stood there. Then the front door opened. A woman stepped out first. His younger sister, Mia. Her hair was tied in a messy bun, and she wore a thick gray sweater. Her eyes widened when she saw him. "Daniel?" He forced a small smile. "Hey." Before she could say anything, another figure appeared behind her. Their father. John Reed. 62. Shoulders broader than Daniel remembered, hair grayer, eyes tired but still familiar. John froze in the doorway. His breath caught slightly, as though he wasn't sure whether the cold air or the sight of his son had struck him harder. Daniel felt his voice tremble as he said softly, "Hi, Dad." The wind drifted through the branches above them, scattering a few dry leaves onto the walkway. John stepped out slowly, carefully, as though afraid the moment might break if he moved too fast. Daniel noticed the small tremor in his father's hand, the lines on his face that seemed deeper than before, the way he looked like he had been carrying too much for too long. "You came," John whispered. Daniel nodded. "Yeah. I thought it was time." The air grew still around them. Even the faint music from the living room stopped, replaced by a quiet that felt both fragile and enormous. Then John took one slow step forward. And another. When he reached Daniel, he didn't say anything. He just pulled his son into a long, tight embrace. Daniel closed his eyes. For the first time in years, his chest loosened. The cold night didn't feel so sharp anymore. Mia wiped her eyes on her sleeve as she watched them. "Come inside," she said softly. "Dinner's almost ready." Daniel nodded and followed them toward the warm light of the house. But as he stepped across the threshold, something inside him shifted. Something small but unmistakable. Because just beyond the living room, past the decorated tree and the flickering fireplace, Daniel saw something he didn't expect. Something that made him stop in place. And for a moment, he wondered if this Christmas Eve would change more than just his relationship with his family. It might change everything. Daniel stood just inside the doorway, letting the warmth from the fireplace wash over him, but his feet wouldn't move. His eyes locked onto the far corner of the living room, just beside the Christmas tree. The golden lights from the branches flickered across the wooden floor, and the ornaments cast tiny reflections that danced like small stars. But that wasn't what made him stop. On the far wall, near the framed family photos, sat a hospital-style oxygen concentrator. The soft mechanical hum was subtle but unmistakable. A thin tube snaked across the floor and disappeared around the hallway corner. Daniel's heartbeat slowed for a moment, then began to thud harder than before. He turned to Mia, his voice uncertain. Who is that for?" Mia hesitated. Her eyes drifted toward the hallway, then back to him. She inhaled slowly as if preparing to say something that had been waiting for weeks. Before she could answer, his father spoke. "It's for me." Daniel's chest tightened as he turned. His father had moved closer to the fireplace, easing himself into the armchair with a faint wince. The moment he sat down, he took a deeper breath, the kind someone takes after walking farther than they should. Daniel stepped forward. "Dad, what's going on?" John rubbed his hands together slowly as if trying to gather warmth from a fire much older than the one in front of him. For a moment, he didn't answer. The house felt still. The faint jingling sound from an ornament brushing against a branch echoed softly through the room. Finally, John looked up. It started a few months ago. Shortness of breath. Fatigue. Doctors said it was mild at first. Then it wasn't. Daniel felt the air leave his lungs. His father's voice was steady, but behind that steadiness was something fragile. Something he had never heard from him before. "Why didn't you tell me?" Daniel asked, barely above a whisper. John's gaze lowered to his hands. "Because you weren't here. And I didn't want to call you just to give you bad news. Not after how we left things." Mia stepped closer, touching Daniel's arm gently as if grounding him. "We wanted to reach out, Danny. But we didn't know if you'd pick up." Daniel closed his eyes tightly. A wave of guilt rolled over him, heavy and cold. He had walked away thinking he had time. Thinking he could fix things later. Thinking later would always exist. When he opened his eyes, his father was watching him carefully, like he was waiting to see whether Daniel would run again or stay this time. "Dad," Daniel said softly, fighting the trembling in his voice, "why didn't you at least tell Mia to call me?" John gave a tired half-smile. "I told her not to. I didn't want you to feel obligated to come back. I'd rather have you walk through that door because you wanted to, not because you felt forced." Daniel swallowed hard. The room suddenly felt warmer and colder at the same time. Before he could speak again, the hallway light flicked on. A woman he didn't recognize stepped out, holding a small tray with medication bottles. She looked to be in her late 50s, with gentle features and dark hair pulled into a neat ponytail. She wore comfortable clothes and moved with a quiet confidence. "Oh," she froze when she noticed Daniel. "You must be Daniel." "I'm Anna. I've been helping your father these past few weeks." Daniel nodded awkwardly. "Hi. I didn't know anyone was helping him." She gave a sympathetic smile. Your father is very stubborn. He only lets me handle the things he can't. Everything else, he insists on doing himself. John rolled his eyes lightly. Don't believe everything she says. Anna chuckled kindly before setting the tray down and returning to the hallway. Daniel took another step forward. Dad, how bad is it? John's eyes flickered toward the oxygen machine, then back to Daniel. He exhaled slowly. It's manageable for now, but the doctors want to run more tests in January. See how things progress. There was a silence so deep that even the fire seemed to crackle more softly. Daniel ran a hand over his face. A part of him felt broken. Another part felt angry, at himself, at time, at the universe, at every moment he wasted thinking tomorrow was guaranteed. He looked around the living room again. The tree, tall and carefully decorated. The stockings hung above the fireplace. The old family photos on the walls. Everything looked the same as years ago, yet nothing was the same at all. Mia squeezed his arm again. Come sit, Danny. Dinner's getting cold. Daniel didn't move immediately. He kept his eyes on his father, trying to memorize the way he looked in that moment, the lines on his face, the way his shoulders curved inward just slightly, the soft fatigue in his eyes. It all felt too real. Finally, Daniel nodded. Okay. He walked toward the dining table, the warm glow of the Christmas lights following him softly. As he sat down, the smells of roasted chicken, herbs, and warm bread filled the air. It should have felt comforting. Instead, it felt like a reminder of everything he had missed. John sat across from him, adjusting the small tubing next to his chair. Mia placed a plate in front of Daniel, her eyes gentle but filled with worry she wasn't saying aloud. Daniel picked up his fork. But just before he took a bite, he looked up at his father again. Dad, I'm here now. I'm not leaving tonight. John's eyes softened, almost trembling with relief. Good, he whispered. I'm glad you're home, son. They began to eat. Slowly. Quietly. Carefully. Outside, the winter breeze rustled the trees. Somewhere down the street, a family was singing Christmas songs. And above the house, the stars began to appear through the thin Los Angeles haze. But Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that this night, this Christmas Eve, was leading him toward something even bigger. Something waiting just beyond the edges of the warm house. Something he hadn't yet seen. Something still coming. Dinner moved slowly, almost too quietly for a Christmas Eve. The clinking of forks and knives was soft, careful, as though everyone at the table was afraid to disturb the fragile peace settling in the air. Outside, faint gusts of winter wind brushed against the windows, making the Christmas lights hanging along the porch tremble gently. Daniel watched his father with an intensity he tried to hide. Every small movement John made, adjusting his breathing tube, shifting slightly to ease discomfort in his chest, pausing between bites, all of it registered inside Daniel like quiet alarms he wished he didn't hear. He kept telling himself to stay calm. It was Christmas. He was home. He had time. But the truth was whispering something else in the back of his mind. Something colder, sharper, impossible to ignore. Time didn't feel generous anymore. After a few minutes, Mia cleared her throat. So, how's work, Danny? Still mixing soundtracks for those indie films? Daniel took a sip of water before answering. Yeah. We wrapped post-production on a documentary last week. Now I'm trying to figure out what's next. His father looked up from his plate. You were always good at that. The sound stuff. You had the ear for it. Daniel felt something warm and painful twist inside his chest. Compliments from his father were rare, even before things fell apart. Thanks, Dad. John gave a small nod and returned to his food. But the small nod carried years of unspoken words between them, apologies neither of them had said, pride neither had expressed, fear neither had admitted. And then, suddenly, a sharp cough cut through the room. John grabbed the edge of the table, his body leaning forward slightly. The cough wasn't loud, but it was the kind that pierced through Daniel like a blade. Mia immediately reached for a glass of warm water, but John raised his hand, signaling he was okay. Just a tickle, John said quietly, wiping his mouth with a napkin. But his hand trembled. Very slightly, but Daniel noticed. He noticed everything now. The room settled again, but the tension lingered like a thin fog no one acknowledged. Daniel forced himself to continue eating, though his appetite had vanished. After a few more minutes, Mia stood up to retrieve dessert from the kitchen. The smell of warm cinnamon and freshly baked pie drifted through the air, filling the room with a comforting sweetness. But before Mia could return to the table, someone knocked on the front door. 3 soft knocks. Not loud. Not hurried. But deliberate. Daniel looked toward the entrance. At this hour? Mia muttered from the kitchen. John frowned slightly. Were we expecting anyone? Mia shook her head. No. Daniel stood. I'll get it. He walked slowly toward the front door, each step echoing faintly against the hardwood floor. The wreath hanging on the door swayed slightly as the cold breeze slipped through the cracks. There was something unsettling about the quiet outside. The street felt too still. The air felt too heavy. Daniel hesitated for a moment before opening the door. Standing on the porch was a man. Mid-50s. Tall. Wearing a dark coat dusted with winter chill and holding a thin folder in one hand. His hair was neatly combed, and his expression was strangely neutral, not friendly, not threatening, but unreadable. Good evening, the man said. His voice was calm, steady. I'm sorry to interrupt your holiday, but I'm looking for John Reed. Is he home? Daniel's heart tightened. He stepped slightly forward, blocking the doorway without realizing it. Who are you? The man reached into his coat pocket slowly, too slowly, and pulled out a small badge. The metal piece glinted under the porch light. Not police. Not medical. Something else. My name is Agent Cole Harrison, he said. I'm with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Daniel froze. The breath left his chest. FBI? Inside the house, John's voice called out. Daniel? Who is it? Daniel didn't answer. Agent Harrison kept his gaze steady. I need to speak with your father tonight. It's urgent. Daniel felt his pulse rise painfully in his neck. This couldn't be happening. Not tonight. Not after everything. His father was sick. Fragile. They were trying to heal. Trying to reconnect. Trying to have one Christmas Eve without chaos. But the universe, apparently, had other plans. What's this about? Daniel asked, his voice low. Harrison exhaled in the cold air, creating a thin fog between them. His tone remained calm. It's about an investigation your father was involved in, many years ago. Something has resurfaced. And we believe he may be in danger. Danger? Daniel felt the air grow colder around him, heavier, tighter. Behind him, footsteps approached. His father appeared at the doorway, leaning slightly on the frame as though even walking across the living room required more strength than he wanted to admit. His eyes landed on the agent, and something in his expression shifted. Recognition. Fear. Resignation. Hello, John, the agent said quietly. It's been a long time. A long silence settled between them. Daniel looked back and forth between them, confusion turning into dread. Dad, what's going on? John didn't answer immediately. He kept his eyes on Agent Harrison, as if speaking too soon would pull something dangerous out of the past. Finally, John took a shallow breath. Daniel, there's something I never told you. Something I should have told you years ago. The wind brushed past the porch, rattling the Christmas lights. Inside the house, the fireplace crackled softly. On the street, no cars passed. No voices. No movement. Just silence. And the truth, slowly rising to the surface. The wind pushed through the torn curtains again, but this time the sound it carried was nothing like the gentle rustle of fabric. It came as a long, quivering exhale, like something wounded, something exhausted, something that had been waiting far too long in the dark. The room seemed to shrink with every breath the shadows took. The air thickened with the scent of damp earth mixed with rusted metal, a sharp, unsettling smell that clung to the back of the throat. In the far corner of the room, where the dim light barely reached, the wooden floorboards that had been merely cracked before now began to bulge upward, as if something beneath them was pushing its way toward the surface. A slow, rhythmic creak, creak, creak echoed through the room, like bones grinding or wood straining under the weight of something unnatural. Each sound came faster than the last, impatient, hungry. The weak light flickered again. Shadows stretched along the walls, too tall and too warped to belong to anything in the room. They moved in ways the bodies that cast them did not, lagging behind, bending forward as if to watch more closely. The air vibrated with tension, as though the room itself were holding its breath. Then, from the widening crack in the floor, a hand emerged, thin, impossibly pale, mottled with scratches that looked like claw marks. The fingers twitched, reaching up blindly, trembling like the hand of someone frozen yet desperate. The nails were long and splintered, coated in dirt and something darker, something like old blood. A faint voice drifted from beneath the floor. It wasn't a whisper. It wasn't human. "Return, what's mine?" The temperature dropped so quickly it felt like the air was being sucked out of the room. Breath turned to frost in the dim light. The voice didn't sound like it came from a throat, more like the echo of a promise made in a place that never should have existed. A sound shaped by regret, rage, and centuries of hunger. The floorboards split apart with a violent crack, sending splinters scattering across the room. Something began to climb out. Something too long, too crooked, too deliberate in its movements. Its limbs folded in sickening angles, like a creature that had forgotten how to move like a human, or had never been one in the first place. Then the face came into view. It resembled a human face in the same way a reflection in broken glass resembles the real thing, recognizable, but warped beyond sanity. The features were stretched, twisted, as though someone had tried to pull them into shape but failed. The skin was tightly drawn, almost transparent, revealing blue veins that pulsed slowly beneath. Its mouth moved silently at first, opening far too wide, as if tearing at the seams. The jaw seemed to hinge a moment too late, as though delayed by something unseen. The eyes were the worst part. They were not entirely empty, there was a flicker of memory in them. Anger. Betrayal. Recognition. As though it knew who stood in the room. As though it remembered something terrible, something unfinished. The pupils expanded, swallowing the light around them, turning the whites of the eyes into swirling, liquid darkness. The walls trembled. The ceiling groaned. The light bulb popped with a sharp snap, plunging everything into suffocating darkness. In that darkness, something moved. Not just a shift of air, no. Something crawled across the space, fast and purposeful, brushing so close along the shoulder that the cold felt like needles piercing the skin. Breath, stale, freezing, dragged itself across the ear. Then the voice came again, impossibly close. "You were not meant to return." A chill deeper than fear settled into the bones, the kind of cold one feels only in the presence of something ancient and furious. Darkness pulsed around them, alive and breathing. The creature shifted, its elongated limbs scraping along the floor. The sound was like nails dragged across stone, a screech that clawed its way into the mind. For a moment, a dim glow flashed, just enough to see the creature rising fully from the floor, its body impossibly thin, its spine twisting like wet rope. The room felt wrong. Wrong in the way forgotten graveyards feel wrong. Wrong in the way abandoned hospitals feel wrong. The air was heavy with memories not belonging to any living thing. A slow dragging sound filled the room, as though the creature was pulling something behind it, a chain, a broken piece of the darkness, or perhaps the memory of whoever it used to be. Every movement was deliberate, rehearsed, as if this moment had been anticipated across lifetimes. The shape turned its head with a cracking sound, vertebrae grinding like stones crushed in a fist. Its distorted mouth shifted. It smiled. That smile was not a gesture of welcome. It was a promise. A promise that whatever it had been waiting for had finally arrived. The shadows pulsed, as if excited. The walls breathed inward. The floor buckled beneath unseen weight. The air shivered around the creature as its limbs reached outward, impossibly long, stretching until the fingertips nearly brushed the edges of the room. Then everything snapped silent. Even the air stopped moving. And the silence felt like a warning. Do not take another step. Do not even breathe. But the creature moved first. It lunged forward in one fluid, horrifying motion, its face inches away, eyes hollow and endless, mouth unhinging wider than any living thing should. The cold radiating from it was unbearable, like the touch of something buried beneath the earth for far too long. Its voice crawled into the mind, not the ears. "You opened the way back, now you cannot close it." A hand, bony, freezing, trembling with unnatural hunger, grabbed onto the ankle. The pressure was immense, as if each finger was a weight of stone. The darkness around them thickened, curling upward from the floor like smoke, wrapping around the legs, creeping along the skin. The creature's grip tightened. The room tilted. Reality wavered. A tearing sound erupted, not from the creature, not from the room, but from the air itself, as though something unseen had split open. A deep, resonant hum vibrated beneath the floor, under the walls, inside the bones. The creature leaned closer, its breath like winter's last breath. It begins again. And as the final sliver of light faded, the shadows surged forward, hungry, relentless, and eager to reclaim what had been lost. The house should have been quiet after everything that happened, after the creature clawed its way out from beneath the floor, after the room twisted and warped like it was breathing, after the shadow swallowed every last trace of warmth. But silence never returned. Not really. Instead, the air carried a low vibration, almost like a heartbeat, pulsing through the walls in slow, steady intervals. As if the house itself had awakened, and had no intention of falling back asleep. The darkness now felt thicker, heavier, almost tangible. It clung to the corners like living tar. The light from the hallway flickered, stretching the shadows into long, hooked silhouettes that twitched with the movement of something unseen. Each flicker made the shadows grow, taller, thinner, sharper. Then everything went still. Not peaceful still, no. The kind of stillness that exists right before something unspeakable sinks its teeth into the world. A faint tapping echoed from beneath the floorboards. Soft at first. Then harder. Then frantic. Tap, tap, tap. As if something, or someone, was trapped there once again. Except this time, the tapping came from multiple directions. The left corner. The right side. The hallway. The ceiling. Everything was tapping now. A syncopated chorus, growing more desperate with every passing second, as if countless hands were pounding, demanding, begging to be let out. The wood began to rattle beneath the pressure, splitting slightly at the seams. And then? It stopped. A breath of cold air drifted across the room, chilling the skin like the touch of a corpse. The lights flickered once more, dimmed, then steadied. The tapping had vanished entirely, leaving behind a silence so deep it felt like the world had been placed inside a vacuum. But the walls. They were still vibrating. Just enough to be felt. Just enough to be wrong. In that trembling quiet, a whisper crawled across the room. Not from the creature. Not from beneath the floor. Not from the hallway. It came from behind. You didn't close it. The voice was soft, brittle, and impossibly close, right at the back of the neck. A shiver shot through the air as the temperature plummeted, turning breath into mist. The whisper carried something else too. Something worse. A second voice layered beneath it, deeper, older, almost inhuman, overlapping like two broken frequencies fighting for the same space. You opened the way. A long, shrill creak sounded behind them, the unmistakable sound of the door they had locked, no, barricaded, slowly dragging open. Inch by inch, the hinges groaned as if protesting. The cold wind that poured in was not from outside. It smelled of earth. Damp soil. Coffin rot. The corridor beyond was pitch black. Not dark, black. Like a void had swallowed every drop of light. As the door fully opened, something stepped forward. Not the creature they had seen earlier. Not the twisted figure that crawled from the floor. This was larger. Taller. It filled the doorway completely. Only the faintest sliver of light outlined its shape. Long, jagged limbs that scraped the floor, a hunched back that rose and fell with each unnatural breath, a head that tilted sideways too far, as if hanging by the last threads of tendon. It didn't move. It only stood there. Watching. Waiting. Listening. Then, from deep inside the darkness behind it, more whispering began. Dozens. Hundreds. Layered voices that rose like a slow, suffocating chant. Let us out. Let us out. You opened the way. You opened the way. You cannot leave now. You belong here. Stay. 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 The words spiraled through the air, weaving themselves into the walls, the floor, the very air they breathed. The vibration intensified until the house itself seemed to throb with the rhythm of the voices. Dust rained from the ceiling. Glass trembled in the window frames. The floorboards underfoot pulsed as though something enormous, something buried, was pushing upward. The figure in the doorway shifted its weight. Slowly. Deliberately. And its shadow stretched across the room like ink poured onto the ground. The shadow crawled up the walls, spreading, climbing, slithering across the ceiling until every surface was covered in darkness. Only a small circle of space remained untouched. A shrinking circle where safety still existed. And even that was disappearing. The figure took one step forward. The air bent inward. Sound warped. The lights dimmed to a thin, dying flicker. Another step. The shadow deepened. The walls moaned. The whispering turned to a low rattling scream, like madness scraping against reality. Another step. The distance between the living and the dead had never felt thinner. The figure's face emerged just enough into the dim light to reveal something impossible, the shape of a human face stretched across a skull that was not human. The skin pulled taut, the eye sockets hollow and bottomless, the jaw cracked open like a fractured mask. And behind those hollow sockets, something moved. Something alive. Something watching. Then, in a guttural, fractured voice, it whispered, "The others are coming." The floor beneath them began to split, long, jagged cracks tearing through the wood like lightning veins. Pale fingers started poking through the gaps, hundreds of them, scratching, clawing, pulling, trying to grip anything they could reach. The ceiling bulged as if something heavy was crawling above it. The walls convulsed. The air thickened with the smell of rot. And just when it seemed the nightmare had taken its full form, just when the figure in the doorway leaned closer, its face inches from theirs, its breath colder than the grave, the whispering stopped. Everything froze. The darkness held its breath. And then, from the deepest corner of the room, a new sound emerged. Knock, knock, knock. 3 slow, deliberate knocks on the inside of the wall. Then a voice, clearer than all the others, spoke directly into the ear. "Don't turn around." And as the final bulb flickered one last time before dying completely, something behind them inhaled. Long, deep, hungry. The last thing they felt was hot breath on their neck. And something with too many fingers closing gently around their shoulder.